Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sync Up Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things OneDrive. OneDrive is the home for all of the files that you care about most, and we are here to take you behind the scenes to get the insights and the knowledge to make your experience and your users' experiences better. My name is Stephen Rice, and I'm a Principal Product Manager on the OneDrive team, and I am joined by my co-host, Arvind.
Hello, everyone. I'm Arvind, and I'm also a Principal Product Manager on the OneDrive team. Now, as evidenced by the title you saw when you downloaded this episode, this is going to be a special bonus episode. While we normally aim to take you into the trenches of the OneDrive team and the product, today we are not going to talk about specific features or plans. Instead, we're going to talk with Jason Moore, the VP of Product Management for OneDrive, about its past and present and future. And Jason, it's an honor to have you here. Welcome back to the Sync Up Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's very weird to be back on this show as a guest. This is like a bad episode of Succession.
Hey, no spoilers here. I just started. We're almost at the end of season 1, so I don't know how it ends. Does it end badly for me and Steven?
I think you guys are going to do just fine.
Jason, we like to kick off every episode now with like an icebreaker, some lighter fare to get the discussive juices flowing, set the tone. So just to kind of start things off, Jason, easy question. Can you tell me how Napoleon's rule impacted the development of democracy in France?
I, in fact, can, and I'm happy to spend the entire podcast on this particular subject. Do you want to start with some of the democratic progression through his reforms, the Napoleonic Code, and principles like legal equality and abolishing noble privileges or freedom of religion or protection of property rights? Or do we go the other way and we talk about how in so many ways he was totally an autocrat and he suppressed his opposition through a police state, he limited free speech, he started aggressive wars across all of Europe, and his downfall led to the monarchy being reinstated. So there's many places we could pick. You just tell me where, and I'm happy to expound on that.
I feel good now. That was meant to be like the gotcha question where we show that Jason Moore is not infallible. There are limits to his knowledge, and not feeling that anymore.
It's a wonderful paradoxical conversation, and I'm open to that. If you want to do that just over coffee, we can engage there.
I was going to say, Stephen, we want to have an audience at the end of this podcast here too.
I think people come here specifically for our insights into French history, Arvind. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
This is the first place I would check for that thing. Hey, Jason, I've got a question for you that's probably a little bit more up your alley. I think you, me, Stephen, we grew up like using computers and stuff. I think we were one of the first generations to probably do that. Would love to know, our audience would love to know, what was the video game that you remember playing on your computer? What was it? Why is it memorable? What kind of computer was it on? Tell the audience about your history there.
I played a lot of computer games in my youth on our home Tandy 1000.
Radio Shack.
Yeah, Radio Shack. And the game that probably captured me the most was by Sierra Online. It was Space Quest 1. I was obsessed with that game, playing that game, and it actually led me to learn how to program. I went and took classes at night at the local university when I was in like the 3rd or 4th grade because I wanted to know how to make something like that. And it was, that had a big impact on me. And the whole range of Sierra games, and then probably from those, the games that I ran into in arcades, Afterburner was my favorite thing to play.
Nice. I remember all of those games. I think Space Quest was, I'm trying to remember, Space Quest, did they run, was that before or after like the King's Quest series? Because those were also Sierra Online.
I think they started with King's Quest, and then Space Quest was one of the first kind of branch outs, turning it into a franchise brand.
Brand extensions.
Yeah. I love those games, and I've actually gone back and replayed, I think, all 6 or so of the Space Quest games in the last couple of years just because of the nostalgia.
Do they hold up?
There's a thing that we all learn as we get older. You'll know one day when you reach my age, Stephen. You look back and you appreciate things for what they were.
Yeah, I've got plenty of time. I'm not worried, Jason.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, that's enough of this nonsense. Let's get into the kind of meat. So obviously, Jason, our listeners are familiar with you, but for those of you who might be new, why don't we kind of start with your basics? Like, when and how did you join Microsoft, back in the day?
Great question. So, I started as an intern. I did internships at Microsoft twice, both on Windows 2000, on IIS, IIS 4.0, the web server that we make. And then my second internship was in the Windows Shell team. So the experiences in Windows, that was 98 and 99. And I became a full-time employee in 2000. So just this week is my 23rd anniversary at the company.
Congrats.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a long time.
I mean, if you're here long enough, I hear they etch your name into a wall somewhere.
Yeah, I've been told you know a little about that.
I've just heard. Hey, but Jason, I've known you for a while, and I seem to remember you always having worked in the area of search and organize. Like that's just, so like back in the day, you're working in search and organize. You worked on this thing called WinFS. Tell us more about those crazy times.
Long predating me, Microsoft as a company has been, I think, appropriately obsessed with how to find and work with all of your data. And if you go back, I think it's the 1991 Comdex, Bill Gates gave a great keynote called Information at Your Fingertips. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. And if you're listening right now, it's a good listen because in that you'll find all of the clues to the next 30 plus years. And I probably will say longer every year to the things that we really want to solve for people. This challenge of making information accessible, protecting information, connecting different kinds of information. So that's kind of always been in the DNA. And when I showed up at Microsoft, not too long after, there became these new opportunities leveraging the next level of technology. So WinFS, and for those that don't know, WinFS was the name of a product where we were taking SQL Server, and integrating it deeply into Windows. So you'd have all the capabilities of SQL built in there. That project became an absolutely wide-ranging project. Lots of very interesting different pieces from it, whether it was think about how to schematize all sorts of different data in a way that would be able to relate, as well as trying to figure out how to then present those in a meaningful way. Because, today's world of ChatGPT, no one's writing SQL queries or T-SQL queries into ChatGPT. That is not a very human or friendly interface. And so I got to work a lot on how those things would come together, how people would leverage metadata and knowledge about different things to bridge them. Now, that ultimately didn't ship. Very different kinds of things came out of it, but the core capabilities have kind of always been something that's been important. If you look, the world that we live in the commercial side with SharePoint, very much a lot of the same kind of desires and grounded nature in the product. The thing that I'd say, though, as you think about this very broadly, is while the general mission of being able to connect those things has always been the same, the approaches actually have changed a lot over time and over the years. So, you might remember back in the day when we had a database in Windows Media Player and you could sort and filter by artist and track and, genre. And we used to have incredible debates about the appropriate schematization of genre. And for anyone listening who is a true audiophile, you're probably screaming at your phone or at your PC right now because you have strong feelings about how these things should be categorized. And we would struggle in that. And the thing that's been really interesting of late in this space has been what's happening now with those large language models, GPT-4 probably is the most famous and kind of latest, greatest example, where we're not actually asking that we figure all of that out necessarily, nor are we asking end users to solve all of the complexity of that themselves. Instead, you can actually have a much higher level conversation and much more interesting understanding that comes out of that. So yeah, I've been working in this space most of my career at Microsoft, and it's been a fascinating one to watch kind of that journey across those pieces.
Yeah, thinking about OneDrive specifically, or maybe not OneDrive, but the predecessors. What was the journey like from your experience as far as, how did we get to where we are today? Where did the product come from?
So Arvind mentioned WinFS, and in about 2004, mid to late 2004, a number of us broke off from kind of the core Windows WinFS work we were doing to build something called Project M. That was a very short-lived project. For about 2 years, you could go find apps the apps that we built. But we were kind of an incubation, kind of startup-focused team trying new tech, trying to figure out what new capabilities to bring to Windows, to bring to users. I'll name some of the ones that were really popular at the time. P2P. P2P was a really big deal, so we were investing a lot in doing things P2P. And this is an era that maybe to people in the modern world would be confused by. But there was a long period of time where the industry thought, well, there's no way we can run all of this stuff from data centers. So we're going to have to solve this peer-to-peer across the tech. Other things that we worked on were visualizations of different content and RSS and news feeds. How should that be integrated? Is that the format of all those pieces? So Project M was really around bringing a variety of these different technologies together and trying to build in a very modern way. Ultimately, the most important things we did actually were all about engineering, all internal, all about how do we create good engineering processes. From there, our team got absorbed into an organization called Windows Live, which had Hotmail and Spaces and Windows Live Writer, and I'm trying to think of some of the other names of products then. Messenger. Oh, absolutely Messenger. And so our team kind of came in and we'd been doing a bunch of stuff that really revolved around content and sharing. And so we built this new team that was kind of, we called it Shared Data Experiences. And each part of the team kind of segmented off to do different things. I wrote a pitch for a product I called SkyDrive that would let you upload files and let you download files and move those around. And at the time, this is 2006, that was not a crazy new idea, obviously, but it was something that was still a struggle for the average person. And the vast majority of people did not take advantage of the cloud for their file content in any way. And so that kind of pitch got us like, okay, fine, we should go build something. We should try something. Handful of PMs, handful of engineers, handful of designers, handful of testers got together, and we started the SkyDrive team building that. From that, so that's October 2006 was when officially that team got kicked off. From there, we went to June 2007. We released the very first beta. We were nervous about how this would go, so we limited the beta to 5,000 people. Today, we would go, why even bother? If you're not going to give it to a lot of people to try out and learn from them, why would you do that? But at the time, we were really worried about it, and we limited. I think we supported 50 megabytes per file and 500 megabytes total. We were really concerned about what to do there. But the product kind of evolved through that. You know, what originally started as something where I think a lot of the people around us thought, yeah, this is a handy feature to have. We should put this feature in MSN Spaces, or this should be a feature of Messenger somehow, or a feature of something else. In the product team, we really knew that this itself, in and of itself, it was a thing, that you needed to have a name and you needed to have a place that was your place on the internet to put your stuff, that was private by default, that you could rely on, that was safe and secure. And those principles really kind of have lasted since then in building out that product. But we started there, and for the next couple of years, it was just kind of this whirlwind of add value and capability. You know, the funny things people talk about is what's the minimum viable product? You know, the first version of SkyDrive didn't even support thumbnails for photos. And it was incredibly rudimentary, but it was proving out the capability. And since then, we've really kind of tackled, okay, what's the next interesting set of things to do? So the first large scale release we had of the Office web apps was with SkyDrive at the time. That was a really fun kind of cross-company project, trying to bring together all these pieces, as well as deep integration with the Office clients. So those Win32 and Mac clients working from that. And then you kind of fast forward to today. Across that, we've gone and taken that from what started as this small project with a handful of people trying to figure out what value there would be, to something with hundreds and hundreds of millions of users now. And we have the commercial and consumer variants in education. And as we look at the next generation of stuff, there's still both these fundamentals of what do people need out of their cloud digital content product, and what are the things that are new and different. So I'm really excited about where that will go.
Just in your story, I mean, you talk about 5,000 customers, which, like you said, we can't even get out of bed these days for something less than that. But tell us about the journey from 5,000 to 1 million customers, because I think that's always ridiculously hard to get to that first 1 million customers than it is to get to your first 10 million customers.
Yeah. I actually celebrate that day every year. It's in February. February 2008 was when we hit 1 million customers. So, less than a year from the original kind of limited beta launch. At the time, we didn't talk about things that we talk about in the industry now a lot, like MAU. We just talked about page views, because the only model that we understood that might exist one day for revenue would be advertising on it. So for those of you who are listening, who ever used SkyDrive in those early days, you may have remembered the kind of fake ads we had on the thing, the 300 by 250s. They were designed to be the industry standard. They just took up the space. So if we did do ads, we wouldn't be taking away anything from folks. We were trying to plan forward on that. And so as part of that, we really focused on page views. But one of the things we knew that would drive that, obviously, is the number of users. And we started by just trying to find ways that we could be useful. So, for example, one of the early popular kind of scenarios was in Windows Live Spaces. So Spaces, for those who don't know, was Microsoft's blogging, kind of consumer blogging product at the time, quite popular. And it had a lot of features. It was one of those things that was an inch deep but a mile wide. And an aspect that it really lacked in was the ability to share any file content. And so we added that capability. So the ability to share, a Word document or a PowerPoint or a PDF of your resume, or these are the days before LinkedIn, or anything else that you had as file content you wanted to upload and share with other people, and especially connect within that community. And that was probably the first big driver of things we did. The second big driver was expanding what you could do with photos through that. So at the time, most photo services were upload and kind of forget, or they were extremely limited in the way they upload. They always transformed your data. With OneDrive, one of the rules we had from day one was we never mess with your data. Like if you give us a file and it's 1010, it's always going to be 1010. We would never mess with it. And so that capability and kind of being more driven based on space allowed us to have people upload a lot more photos. And so that actually quickly overtook the photo sharing stuff that was already built into Spaces. And it became part of that. It was like, oh, wow, that works. And so we had to quickly scramble and go get thumbnails working and a bunch of other pieces. But that first million users was really driven by those two pieces. Now, the interesting thing is that a couple of years later, we would actually go on to ship the first camera roll backup in a phone. So Windows Phone shipped with the first kind of built-in save your photos to the cloud. And that was SkyDrive built into Windows Phone as part of that. And that became an absolutely massive hit for us during the life cycle of Windows Phone, but drove a lot of that engagement. And for many of our users, it was the first time they ever used it.
I mean, to be fair, I think I qualify in that bucket. Like I was a diehard Windows Phone user because I came from BlackBerry and I didn't know any better, which maybe not the nicest thing to say now, but that's fine. I think I used SkyDrive before I had a Windows Phone, like lightly. Like I had, ran a couple random storage things, but I think SkyDrive and the photo backup was where like my entry point to getting me here today. So you got at least one customer.
Yeah, awesome.
I think I used SkyDrive. I wasn't even at Microsoft at the time. I think I used it just because I knew Jason worked on it and wanted to give him crap about it. But no, it was a good product. It was a good product for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about if we took any of those products from that day and age and brought them forward to today, we'd point out all the ways that they are deficient. And there are many, even in whatever your favorite was at the time. And I think that kind of talks to like how in the tech industry, the stuff we're constantly iterating, learning, and growing all of that. And the thing that I love about software is that it is malleable those ways. So what we give to people today is just so much better. I'm sometimes a little embarrassed to think back to, those issues and challenges and gaps and things we just didn't support or do.
That is a very perfect segue, Jason. So you talked about the journey to 1 million. I'm really curious, like looking back over the history of OneDrive, what do you think were the biggest challenges that the team or the product faced in that time?
So many challenges. I'll start with the first one because I think it's formed a lot of the team's, spirit in some way, which is we were always a bit of an underdog and a bit of the group of folks that was a little underfed, a little underserved at the company. And, we had to fight for attention and space across those things. And sometimes that led to maybe a little bit a pirate flag over the offices and doing things our way. But ultimately, I think that led us to push through in a bunch of interesting dimensions. So we always were a little bit leaner. We always wanted to be a bit leaner. We'd rather be a bit lean than not. But we tended to do things like say, okay, well, let's just try it. Let's go and do those things. I can't tell you the number of hours I spent in meetings just trying to agree that we could put out software from Microsoft that had the beta tag on it. That like, hey, we debated this endlessly, but this notion that we didn't know how people were going to use this stuff. We wanted to give it to them and put it in their hands. And, internally at the company at the time, there was this feeling that you really didn't have permission to do that. Google doing that with Gmail, I think, started to break that mold in a big way, but it took years and years later for us to really catch up on that. And so we would take that opportunity a little bit. Okay, they're not paying attention to us as much. Maybe we can get away with trying a few more things. And as a result, that kind of the scrappy nature that came out of that has kind of powered the team, when we decided to really get after creating premium value and making subscriptions for OneDrive that we could be really proud of and we would encourage everyone to want to get. We didn't say, hey, okay, let's put a $sign on it, put a front door there and ask for your credit card. We said, let's go think about what are the scenarios? What's the value? How do we do that? Let's go be incredibly harsh on ourselves about whether or not we're getting people to believe in that product and to believe into those things and use that to iterate as quickly as we could with the product. And I think it's allowed for us to have some pretty tremendous growth as a result. And so you think about kind of that as one frame of it. The other one that I would probably put out there is that we very much focused on being a team. And before we knew the words, an inclusive team. And so the notion that we should be as diverse as our customer base, that we should be inclusive to different ideas and perspectives while still being able to coalesce to a plan and work at it is something that I'm incredibly proud of for the team. It's not something you might know using the product, but I look back on every release and everything we've done. And one of the things that's really important to me is that we've done it with that high standard of who we are as a team in an inclusive way. And, the leaders that we have today have, many of them have come up through that, but we've also been able to attract amazing talent from outside the team and outside the company, in part because of the environment we create for folks. And that's something I think is part of the culture of how we work.
It really does feel like OneDrive is a special place within the company. I'm fascinated just like on the challenge that you likely had in going to an iterative style of development at a company that is just known for like shipping like in really long, sort of windows, right? Like what was tell us, because that's the way everyone develops software these days, right? So like how did we get there?
Yeah. We struggled as a company with that in a lot of ways. I can't speak for all parts of the company, but certainly in my experience, we struggled because we had a plan and it worked really well for a really long time, that roughly 3-year cycle. If you were a customer at the time, you kind of like, okay, you had a rough idea of when Microsoft would build and ship things and work through all those. But one of the things that might not be obvious is that it also allowed for a very different style of the way people live their personal lives. So, whether it was when we had crunch time, that kind of happened through all of that and all of the downsides and negatives of those pieces. But also when we had these lead times, when we had these opportunities for folks to relax and change. So just so, you kind of have a picture of it, in planning the next release, the product management and even the design and usability teams would be deep in the work. And the engineering team would be thinking about architecture and some high level stuff, but the gas wouldn't be on fully. And once we landed the plans 3-6 months into that, gas got put on a lot more. We got to the next level of detail, a lot more going into spec work and design detail on those things, and then into real execution across it. And various disciplines and roles and teams kind of ebbed and flowed through those pieces. But towards the end of the release, you had a lot more of kind of people taking time saying, okay, well, the engineering team, the design, the developers and the testers would at the time were working to finish something. You'd have a lot more folks kind of going on vacation out of the product management world. And then boom, you're into the next release and it flips over again. And so we had these cadences. So there was a natural culture and expectation built around them. On top of that, there was an incredible fear about our ability to go and engage customers. If there's a new Windows release every 3 months, eventually they all blur together. and they're continuously there. And if you look back over the last 20 years, you'll see where we've experimented with how to talk about that. Like, how do you talk about something that's ever going with that? And I think actually it was in the era of services, once we really embraced cloud services, that it kind of clicked. Oh, this is a service. It's a service for us to think about how these products work. And there's still moments where we bring everything together and we share and we tell our story. And, we want to get the press to pay attention to us. We want to get all of our customers to go, oh my gosh, there's something exciting and new. I should pay attention. Because, everyone's got limited time for all of those pieces. And cracking that nut was really, really important for us to get to that world. But in the middle bit, I've described it as like, oh yeah, we had this realization. And for a decade, we struggled with figuring that out. And it had many, many layers. You could talk about the engineering layer and say, gosh, the way we used to do it, like in Windows Live, we try to do 3 years, eventually came like 18 months long cycles where we'd have like an overall big vision and plan, quite detailed. So it took quite a bit of time to put it together. Then we'd have an engineering, there'd be like a breakdown of the engineering. They'd be like, okay, we're going to do 3 milestones of 4 months each. And there's 2 months of coding and 2 months of testing and debugging, and so on and so forth. And that kind of range of that process was there. So as soon as you said, hey, we want to do something shorter, the developers would go, well, I can't take less time for coding. It takes time to code. And the testers would say, I can't take less time to test. We'll have a lower quality product. How do I do that? And the PM team and the designers, all of those kinds of same things. Everyone struggled how to give it up. So you talk about this global thing, even if you got agreement on that, you have these local challenges for it. And so we had to work those one by one. And over time, we realized, things like when you looked at the competition, they weren't on a 3-year schedule. And when we wrote down a plan for 3 years, it was so quickly out of date, it wasn't relevant. I remember very clearly the year where we were working on the next set of plans. I think it was wave 2 for Windows Live, and Facebook was at 50 million users. And everyone was like, wow, that's big growth. That's big growth. And, less than a year later, there were 100 million users. And the things we'd written down about how to think about Facebook weren't even remotely relevant anymore. And yet we had this plan to go work on. So all of those things are real challenges for how the company kind of moved through that. But in fits and starts, it did, especially as it realized like, hey, once we build a service, it's always got to be running. A service takes on a responsibility of 24/7. So there are people always ready and available to work on any problem. Now, of course, you want to build services that don't have those problems as often as possible, but that's still the promise, is this 24/7 nature. And as soon as you start doing that, you start breaking up the roles and functions in a different way, and you start to think about how you build the product in a different way. So slowly, piece by piece, we got to the point where we started separating these things out, decoupling them, trying to find ways that were a little more agile in that. Oh, and I should mention, through the background of this, of course, many debates on agile versus waterfall, lots of papers written, lots of debates had. Ultimately, like all things, there was some amount of in the middle with a range of specialization for different problems across that. But that's kind of the journey we went through on that. And today, today we have, again, a very hybrid world for what we do with OneDrive, where, we tend to look a couple of years out every couple of years, like what are big things on the horizon, but it's meant to be more inspirational and aspirational than it is directive. So we don't take a lot of time with it. And then we carve up our year into semesters. So we don't spend too much time constantly checking in with executives. We really have a cadence where the team has room to go and do those things. And then throughout each of those semesters, we have many releases. And it depends on the product when that release is a big, meaningful release that we want to tell a story about, and when it's just the latest update. So, our mobile app ships every 2 to 4 weeks. Same with the sync client bits. Most of those aren't big, meaningful moments, but we're constantly tweaking and improving it. They always have great bug fixes that are making the product better for everybody. And so once you start looking at that, you go, okay, we've kind of decoupled shipping from the moments we want to make and the stories we want to tell. We've tried to decouple shipping from the big executive reviews. While those things tend to be structured around what are we trying to do and have we done the thing we tried to do, that gives us the room for the team to really go work those pieces. And you tend to look at overall what's happening as opposed to trying to say, Monday, May 37th was the day where everything came together.
I want to ask you about a specific, I don't know if I'd call it a challenge yet. I'll let you decide if it deserves that word. This starts the day I joined Microsoft.
That was a challenge.
I know. I apologize every day to you for it.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for everyone involved.
But obviously, you've talked a lot about the consumer experience for OneDrive, but a big moment, circa 2014, Satya's been CEO for about a year now at this point. And Microsoft started combining a lot of our consumer and commercial businesses into a single unit. And my experience with this, just to kind of paint you a word picture, is, fresh Steven, fresh out of college, joining this SharePoint product, which I've never heard of before. I don't know what it does. Friday, there's an all hands, which is a phrase I've never heard before, but I guess it means we're all going to go sit in the conference room.
Yeah.
And our CVP got up and started with, "Hey, I realize all of you are stressed right now, and you should be." And I was just sitting there like, oh, what have I gotten into? And looking back, this was one of those big moments where we brought the OneDrive consumer business and the SharePoint and OneDrive for business enterprise business together. What was that like from your perspective? Like, what was the trend and how do you feel it all went?
I was in the consumer world at the time, and so I only have that perspective of the experience. But we'd known for a little bit that this was going to happen, and we had been kind of starting to talk and work through, okay, how do we make the most of this? Because I think up until then, the company really hadn't benefited from saying, hey, all you folks thinking about these scenarios, why don't you work together really well on it? And I know from the outside that might sound silly. There were some good reasons those things kind of grew that way, but it really was a point where we recognized that. And, credit Satya in particular for really pushing, I think, on making that happen. And so we kind of knew this was happening. We were coming together, at least the leadership, and we were trying to figure out what that would be. And the day that it was done, we had actually had a meeting because we'd been working on what are things we can align on. I think it was a meeting maybe on the OneDrive mobile app, and how would we get that mobile app to talk commercially and be an appropriate app for a commercial EDU user. I got so many hugs that day. So we were in the building that the SharePoint team was in at the time, and coming out of the meeting, and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, the mail is out. It's official. It's done." And leaders across the OneDrive and SharePoint teams just kind of spontaneously broke out into hugs. And I've been through a number of reorgs, and I've never had that experience in a reorg. It was a new and different one, but it was, I think, kind of a sense of palpable relief. This notion of hey, we're going to be empowered to go work together and to do something great and break down some of those challenges that organizations have where they tend to ship the communication lines between them. And so doing that was a really big moment. And then as we rolled it out to the team, obviously change is hard. Even if it changes good, it's really hard. And so I wasn't in the meeting you were in, Steven. Sounds like that was an interesting way to open it. But working through those things, we had a lot of those conversations. There were certainly folks who weren't convinced yet about it. And it was in the backdrop of, we've got this new CEO who is really saying this is a new era at Microsoft. And at the time I thought, yeah, it is, it's the second new CEO I'd seen at Microsoft. But looking back, it's obvious just how much of a sea change that was. So that moment to me was one I look back with great fondness on as a very special state for our team and the products and bringing those things together, and frankly quite hopeful. There was a lot of hard work ahead. There were a lot of problems to go solve. We definitely did not have all the answers, and not everything was going to make everybody happy, right? Whenever you make a choice. But yeah, it was incredibly hopeful, exciting moment at that time.
It is just crazy to me to look back. Commercial didn't have a mobile app at the time. We now have a single mobile app for both. I think we had two sync clients, one for consumer, one for enterprise.
We had even more.
So how are these two worlds coming together, though, at this point?
Oh, so you've got to imagine you've got this team that has been consumer focused, and Windows Live was part of the Windows organization. And so there was always, the lens that we looked at everything through was colored in, I guess, 4 colors on that. But that was kind of an approach we had. Whereas the SharePoint organization had both been kind of part of and in the orbit of Office and Exchange and focused on commercial customers. And those were two different cultures to come in. So you can imagine in the world of SharePoint, for those of you listening who have grown up with SharePoint, you know how mission critical SharePoint has been for so many different things. And so there was, this elevated understanding of, oh my gosh, like we have a responsibility and accountability to these, not just the individuals, but to these organizations, to these businesses. And we can't be flippant about that. And so, hey, yeah, we've got this, we're used to doing a 3-year planning schedule or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And in the OneDrive consumer world, where we had come from, like I said, a little bit of this rogue state, a little bit of this underdog spirit, and very much in a consumer world where so much that changed things or ruled, it was the total sum, the absolute weight of people and making sure you were pleasing those folks, and a notion that we could go faster. Right. We could iterate quicker. We could try things out in production that people wouldn't just be, they wouldn't not be unhappy about us releasing a beta, but they would actively look forward. They would encourage it. They'd want to try it. They'd want to play with it. They'd want to see, they'd want to give feedback. And so we kind of brought those two worlds together very quickly. And I think there was a lot of mutual respect, but also a lot of mutual misunderstanding, where we didn't truly have that sense. I remember the first meeting I had to go to with a customer to talk about, at the time, the Groove-based client we had for Sync in OneDrive for Business. And, the reality was it wasn't a great product. I'm sitting there, I'm learning all of this stuff. I'm just getting my head around it. And I had a customer telling me about how this was not helping their business. And I was overcome with just this profound, really sense of shame and accountability that we had failed this customer. We just hadn't done good enough. And that really colored for me like, understanding what these customers need and want, what they're going through, and feeling incredibly accountable to enabling them was a really, really, really big part of it. And that we went through that 1,000 times, and 1,000 different people had their version of that story and that journey. And we had tough decisions. We had different visual design styles. We had different approaches to coding styles, documentation in the code. At every possible layer, there were different things. And over time, we had to start stitching those together. And inevitably, when you think about, deciding on, okay, we're all going to do things this way, it means that something is what we're not doing. And it's, easy for people to see that as like, oh, this won and this lost, to label those things in that way. And we struggled with that. Sometimes we were kind of in that. We struggled with some of the big technical decisions to go do. But some of the ones that we made early on, I thought they turned out to be incredibly prescient. Like, hey, we're not going to have multiple clients. We're really going to build one client that's amazing and great, whether someone needs to use it at work or at home. Because it turns out most of the problems we have to solve are the same, and customers actually just want it to work. So we got to do that. We went through decisions on naming. For a long time, it would only recently when we merged had SharePoint My Sites been renamed. First SkyDrive Pro, alluding to the original SkyDrive name, and then second as a OneDrive for Business. And then a couple of years later, we dropped for Business, and it's all just OneDrive. But going through that meant change, and we had customers out there that said, I like My Sites. I understood sites. My Sites made sense to me. It works that way, My Sites for me and a Team Sites for we. Those were all very rational things, but we had to weigh the balance of what are we doing for today versus the growth that we get for the next 100 million, 500 million, a billion customers on that. How do we make sure that we're really inclusive of all the customers that might come on and make that as simple as possible? And so we made some of those key decisions. I think now they stand out as kind of obvious, maybe in hindsight, that, people do really need a brand to attach to this. They want to know what app to search for to be able to get to their content and work with it. And they'll prioritize and trust those things. But there is, I'm sure, many books that could be written about all of those different decisions, and probably a lot of them that we got wrong. I know we definitely changed our minds on things and switched on them a whole bunch. Hopefully, for all of you listening, it wasn't too painful as we tried to figure that out and get smarter and better. But yeah, that was a heady experience.
I feel like you've done a really good job of sketching out like how we got to where we are today. OneDrive is kind of one of those central pillars for the kind of Microsoft 365 experience. As we start looking kind of a little bit towards the future, not at, the features that are coming out next week, next month, or even this year necessarily, but in your mind, Jason, has the mission of OneDrive changed since we started when it was, SkyDrive and you first hit that first 5,000 beta? Or how has the mission changed, or has it changed at all?
I'd love to say yes or no, just to be really black and white about it. And I'll say generally no, and I'll explain why no, but I'll allow for some nuance. We have definitely evolved and learned. And so I'll tackle that first. So, I mentioned early on page loads was a key metric, right? Because that's how many ads you could show, and page load time, and PLT1, PLT2, all these kinds of things. Those were the metrics. And today we're incredibly more advanced on those things in terms of how we think about performance and how we measure it, or how we think about core values for end user success. One of the most popular ones that we have, and I think really guides a lot of the decisions we make internally to the team, is TTF, or time to file. This notion that it's our job to get you to that content as fast as possible. OneDrive's not an app that we're trying to get you to dwell in. We don't goal ourselves on the minutes a day you spend there. We goal ourselves on getting you to do the thing you want to do and being successful as quickly as possible with that. So in those ways, I think we've evolved and changed and refined our understanding of customers, our understanding of their needs, our understanding of what success looks like for us. But they all feel directional. And so that's why I kind of say, at a fundamental level, it hasn't changed. And I think back to, we're some 80 years on from the invention of a computer file. And depending on how you like to market, lots of people have different ways. But fundamentally, in our modern world, there has never been a time where we don't have this notion of a file. The details have changed. The specific implementation of file systems and the exact definition of a file has changed. And I think we continue to see that evolve and grow. And, when you think about something like Figma or Power BI board, Loop, these are all the evolution of that. But from an end user perspective, that concept of this is an object, it has a name, it has a lifetime, it has security associated with it. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs for fundamentals of computing. And I think one of the reasons that these products remain so popular and continue to grow is because they are fundamentals. They are part of the way we interact and make the digital world make sense to us as human beings. And so the mission of OneDrive, the focus of OneDrive, really comes down to core human needs and values. One of the most important ones is this notion of security and safety, that we're going to take care of your stuff. If I say I'm going to watch your house, you expect me to take care of your house and not let it burn down or let people come in and steal stuff. The same thing is true with OneDrive. And that's been, while we've gotten incredibly sophisticated about what that means for us to do, that's still the core promise and this thing we want customers to feel, whether it's at work or at home. When we talk about this notion of access, being able to get to your stuff, one of the amazing things about our digital world is we can put stuff at our fingertips everywhere. And so it's meaningful. It's important that we have a mobile app, that we are integrated into pretty much every product Microsoft makes, that there's the third-party capabilities for that we show up, and we have deep integration in Windows, that we have that experience on Mac, that we have this website that you can access on pretty much any device, that in Outlook and Teams, and so on and so on and so on. Access is a fundamental thing. Again, that's touching this human need to be able to get to their thing that they care about. And the more we do that, the more we're reinforcing those. And then, if I put a third one there, I think the third one there is to make it meaningful and to have meaningful value come out of that. This is maybe a little bit more vague, and we actually break this down in other ways. I won't bore everyone with it. But one of the most simple examples I think about is with digital photos. You took those photos, they're your photos, they're your memories. We're there to store them for you, keep them safe. We're there for you to share them with other people, to collaborate. That's fundamental capability there. We're there to make sure you can access them wherever you want. But one of the things that's been most valuable is as your digital footprint grows, as the amount of content that is your life continues to grow, whether that's a work life and the things that you're doing there, whether that's your personal life, whether that's at school, we have this opportunity and responsibility to help you connect back to it. And the simplest example is our moments of joy, that on this day message you might get saying, hey, here's photos that you've taken on this day over the years. We call that internally a moment of joy. And we think of that as a way to help connect you back to your life that's well lived, to be able to tell you and remind you about those stories. They're all in your mind somewhere, but you're not thinking about them every day. You've got a million things going on. And so part of the responsibility and opportunity we have is to fill this role of memory keeper and emotional connection that comes out of those pieces. And I think that's as true as it was when we started working on those things. We said we got to do thumbnails on photos, to all the way to today and to kind of where we'll go in the future.
I think your head must still be in like getting page views, because like every day I log into that to my OneDrive to see my moments of joy. And so you get at least one page view from me. That said, AI is like this incredible buzzword, and it's permeating all of the software products that are out there, including here at Microsoft.
Yeah.
How is AI going to like solve real problems for our OneDrive customers?
Yeah, you all know my favorite word with AI is going to be drudgery, and how we remove drudgery. And the company, I think,
I got to put a counter on my board, Jason.
That's
Sweet.
10 for
Complete
today.
my bingo
That's
card.
excellent. I'm hitting my quota. No, I'll start there, but I don't think it ends there. The current age of AI we're in and all these pieces, I love that the company has kind of rallied around this term of removing drudgery, because I think it's very easy for us to think, we have so many examples in literature, cinema, and more about how we get reduced by AI and robots and all of that as people. And I think the magic of AI, the true power of it, is that it's fundamentally something we can do to improve the experience and lives of everyone on the planet, to remove things like the drudgery of work, in this case, knowledge work, that's just not. It's not truly meaningful to the human condition or experience. And so that's a theme that comes through across the company. And I think it just applies to OneDrive like anything else. So as we think about AI, what are the ways we can remove that? What are the ways that we're actually taking drudgery out of the process? And I'm not gonna share new features coming up. But that is absolutely a big lens. I'll give you a couple other hints.
All right.
So finding ways to remove drudgery is really important as part of that. I think of that as general about augmentation, though. Like, so how can I do what I'm already doing better? Maybe my job doesn't change in a huge way, but I can do a better job at it. And so that's something that you'll continue to see if you've paid attention to some of Microsoft's releases over the last 6 months, some of the big news we've done with Copilot and the Copilot capabilities, whether it's in Office or Bing or wherever. Oh, Bing, I guess Bing Chat. We don't call Copilot there, but those abilities to engage and connect with that and let you create things, I think is really about elevating the creation capabilities that everybody has. I'll give you a fun example. You all know this, but every now and then I will go and take a song about OneDrive and have it recorded as an actual song. And the most recent one I did was just working with ChatGPT to write a song that would be a little bit more R&B about OneDrive. And it was a lot of fun to just go play and do it. It was a creative thing. It's something that I don't particularly feel skilled or talented at. I think we'd all agree.
Very much so.
And because of this technology, I at least could try and do something that I enjoyed, that I found was a creative expression, was a fun engagement for that. So when we think about AI, I think that kind of thing, the creative nature, bringing that more into it, one, I think there's a lot of joy to be found in that. And two, I think it enables us to do things we otherwise couldn't do. One of the things that is still with me to this day is the first time I used PowerPoint. And I remember using PowerPoint. I tried a bunch of these things before, but I used PowerPoint, I opened it up, and the first slide said title. It had a box and it said title, and the thing it said subtitle. And I felt like I was almost done, because I didn't have to figure out how to lay out the slide or what should go into places. It said title. I should just put the title there. So I did that, put in a subtitle. Next slide. Oh, title at the top, bullets down the side. I was like, oh, okay. And there were other options I could pick from. But I filled out this PowerPoint presentation in what felt like incredibly quickly, because all of these choices that I wasn't equipped to make good choices on anyway were actually handled. And it felt like 90% of the work part of it had been done. And it was just the parts that I was uniquely capable of, like thinking about what is a good title for this topic and subject? How do I lay out and break down the parts of this problem? Those were the things that I, as the human, was bringing to it. I think that was a magical moment for me, because it really expressed how software can give you superpowers, and it can help you do the things that you're not an expert at, that you're not the best at. I think the AI work that we're doing, the LLM work, Copilot, et cetera, is the next generation of that in a huge way, because it's helping us to do and figure out things we've never done. So that will come into play. You'll see that more and more throughout the product. But the third pillar of all this stuff that I'll close on is, we don't think that those are all the AI things that are interesting. Today, we use AI in all sorts of ways behind the scenes. We use it to understand customer feedback. We use it to monitor the state of the service. We use it to look at things like abusive ransomware capabilities coming in and protecting individuals from that. And we're increasingly using it in media content across those things. And, I think if you look out in the world today and look at what are the things people do with their photos, with their videos, with the content they're pulling together, whether it's at work or it's at home, they're incredibly rich systems that, combined with either large language model technology, all the fuzzy logic kind of AI of maybe more recent years, interpreting things that are, in a photo. Those things all come together in some really magical ways to say, hey, you actually can do a lot more with this content, and we're going to enable you to do that without having to do all the work. I talked earlier before, one of the challenges we had in WinFS was the schema of everything and trying to figure out the flexible version of every schema so they could all interrelate forever. And it's incredibly hard, and incredibly brilliant people just poured a ton of energy and effort into trying to crack, how to make that work. And I think the modern era of AI is in some ways allowing us to go and say, we don't need to be perfect. We need to understand enough, and then we need to teach and train these systems, and our usage can help us do that. And through that, we're going to expose some really, really compelling scenarios and things that I think, will go from everywhere from, oh, that's cool, to, okay, that blew my mind. I didn't think we could do that before. I didn't think, I as an individual could achieve or do those things. And now I've got something that literally in the click of a button enables me to do those. So I think those are going to be some really interesting pieces with AI coming together, both in OneDrive, but also through all the partnerships we have, all the apps and systems that we support and connect into.
One thing I just want to say before we go, the funny thing, I love that you tied it back to WinFS. I remember the days when we were like, hey, it would be really cool if you could say, show me all the things that are associated with this meeting and all the things that I need to do in order to be productive in this meeting. And like full circle with the latest features that are coming in OneDrive that we announced at Collab Conference just about a month ago. We have a new meetings view that shows you all things that are important to a meeting. And it's finally here. Glad we thought about these things 20 years ago.
Well, and a good example, I think, of how those things evolve, and you kind of go, oh, what's the core need and scenario? Yeah, we want these things to relate in different ways, but wow, it's really powerful just to say, hey, can I get back to the files that were shared in that meeting? Can I get back to the thing that was presented in that meeting? It turns out that that's a really meaningful thing. And of course, the world moving to these digital meetings allowed us to also turn that analog, where you remember the days when someone would show up on the presentation and they'd have a printed handout of every slide for everybody in the room.
Black and white. Color was too expensive.
That's right. So it was all black and white. And we all debated about what style to print it out at, but that's what we did. And as a result, those things never truly made it into the digital record. Now those things are there. And so I think some of the dreams and some of the desires of the past become a lot more manifest and real, and we get to build on that.
Thank you, Jason, for joining us and sharing that fascinating look into your mind. Where can people find you online?
It's great. I am on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/JAS-MO, Jasmo.
Perfect. And of course, if you want to learn more about OneDrive and the latest and greatest, you can check out our blog at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog. You can find me at LinkedIn as well at srice08. And you can find Arvind at Arvind Mishra 1, the number 1.
All right. Now, Jason, to send us out, why don't you tell us about your R&B overnight hit, the one you talked about a little bit ago? Send us out on it.
Yeah, there's a little song, little love song about OneDrive, a little smooth, easy listening for everybody out there that talks about why OneDrive is great for you and how OneDrive feels about you too.
Listen up, y'all, I got a story to tell about a cloud that got some mad skills to sell. OneDrive's the name with storage that's insane. Keeps all your files, never lets a thing change. Ain't no need to stress or break a sweat. Just drag and drop and your files are set. Access from anywhere at any time of day. This cloud's got your back in every single way. Yeah. OneDrive, it's the king of the cloud. Never loses a file and always stands proud. OneDrive, it's the future we see. Ain't no other cloud that can compete with me. Yeah. With Office and more, it's a one-stop shop for all your documents that'll never stop. From presentations to spreadsheets, it's got it all. OneDrive makes it easy for you to have a ball. Security's tight with decryption on site. No need to worry, your files are out of sight. So don't be shy and make the switch today. OneDrive's the cloud that'll show you the way. Yeah. OneDrive, it's the king of the cloud. Never loses a fight and always stands proud. OneDrive, it's the future we see. Ain't no other cloud that can compete with me. Yeah. So remember the name OneDrive, don't you forget. It's the cloud that got your back, so you ready and set for all your storage needs. It's got the game on lock. OneDrive, it's the king of the cloud.
Once again, a huge thanks to Lisa for helping us produce this amazing podcast. As always, we love hearing from you, our listeners. You can reach us at Twitter at OneDrive, and if you've got a question, tag it with #SyncUp. You can visit our page for more links and resources at aka.ms/syncup. Don't forget to subscribe to SyncUp wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoy SyncUp or find it useful, tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best way to get people engaged and help us grow the show. If you're curious about other Microsoft podcasts, check out aka.ms/Microsoft/podcasts.
Thank you for listening to Sync Up. We've been your hosts, Stephen and Arvin, and we'll catch you next month.